There you go. I told you, didn't I? As soon as you went to a break, Chris Grayling would get to his feet. Here he is.
In December, following a collective government decision and a procurement process involving my department and the Treasury, we contracted with 3 shipping companies to provide additional ferry capacity as part of contingency planning for a potential no-deal EU exit. Now, let me start, Mr. Speaker, by being absolutely clear that in the event of a no-deal Brexit, the government's priority is to ensure the smooth operation of both the Port of Dover and the Channel Tunnel, and we are putting in place measures at the UK end to contribute to this. However, any sensible government plans for all eventualities. That is why we agreed contracts worth around £100 million, with the bulk of the award, £89 million, going to DFDS and Brittany Ferries to provide services across 7 separate routes. Built into those agreements are options to add capacity on 2 other routes from those companies, should they be required. This capacity could be required to guarantee the smooth flow of some key goods into the UK, particularly for the NHS. It's worth reminding the House that in the event of no deal and constriction on the short strait, this capacity would be sold on to hauliers carrying priority goods. In addition to the £89 million of contracts with DFDS and Brittany, the Department for Transport entered into a £13.8 million contract with Seabourn Freight to provide ferry services from the port of Ramsgate to Ostend. At the time of the award, we were fully aware of Seabourn's status as a start-up business and the need for Seabourn to secure vessels and port user agreements in order to deliver a service. However, the shorter distance between the 2 ports meant that the route could provide us with shorter journey times and lower cost, making it a potentially attractive part of the package. Seabourn's proposition to the department was backed by Arklow Shipping, Ireland's biggest and one of Europe's largest shipping companies. For commercial reasons, I've not been able to name Arklow Shipping or mention their involvement to date, but their support for the proposition from the outset and the assurances the department received provided confidence in the viability of this deal. Arklow confirmed to me that they intended to finance the purchase of ships and would be major shareholders in Seabourn. They also confirmed to me their view that the Seabourn plans were, and I quote, both viable and deliverable. These assurances included clear evidence about the availability of suitable vessels from the continent and about the formal steps which Seabourn via Arklow had taken to secure these vessels. However, releasing this information into the public domain could have significantly driven up the cost of the vessels and might even have resulted in them being removed from the market where supply is extremely scarce. I therefore had to refrain from saying anything publicly about this to date. My department monitored closely the progress of Seabourn towards meeting its contractual commitments. By last week, the company had secured firm options on ships to operate on the route and had reached provisional agreement with Ostend and was close to doing so with Ramsgate. However, late last week, despite previous assurances, Arklow Shipping suddenly and unexpectedly withdrew their backing from Seabourn. In the light of this, and after very careful assessment, I took the decision to terminate this contract. My department concluded that there were now too many major commercial issues to be resolved to enable Seabourn to establish alternative arrangements and finance in the time needed to bring ferries and ports into operation. Mr. Speaker, as I have repeatedly made clear, not a penny of taxpayers' money has gone or will go to Seabourn. The contracts we agreed with the 3 ferry companies are essentially a commitment to block book tickets on additional sailings after the UK leaves the European Union. So actually, we've taken a responsible decision to make sure that taxpayers' money is properly protected. I can confirm, Mr. Speaker, that contracts with DFDS and Brittany Ferries remain on track and will provide us with valuable additional freight capacity into the UK in the event of disruption following EU exit. We also have contractual options to replace the Seabourn capacity with additional capacity on routes in the North Sea, and this is an option we will be discussing across government in the coming days. Mr. Speaker, whilst the focus of this government is to secure a deal with the European Union, as a responsible government, we will continue to make proportionate contingency plans for a range of scenarios. That, Mr. Speaker, is the right thing to do.
Andy MacDonald.
Mr. Speaker, what began as a debacle has now descended into a Whitehall farce. This minister is rewriting the textbook for ministerial incompetence in office. I repeatedly warned the Secretary of State that this was the wrong decision at the time, as did industry, yet he chose to ignore those warnings. He told the House last month that this procurement was done properly. It's since emerged that the DfT took shortcuts on the seaborne freight procurement. The deal was signed off by a subgroup of a subgroup, and the main form of oversight, the Procurement Assurance Board, never looked at it. He points the finger at Arklow for the contract consolation. Mr. Speaker, is it really a good time to further insult the Irish? Isn't the Arklow angle a distraction from his decision? He's produced a letter from the company more than a month after the contract was signed. It doesn't prove anything regarding due diligence. He told this House that the Seabourn contract was responsible stewardship of public money. Sadly, the exact opposite is true yet again. His decision toward the contract to Seabourn led Ramsgate port owner Thanet Council's budget deficit to grow by nearly £2 million in the last year. His personal intervention to halt the budget vote last Thursday has compounded those losses. 2 days later, he pulls the plug on Seabourn, leaving the council high and dry with mounting losses. What's more, taxpayers face a legal bill of nearly £1 million to fight Eurotunnel following his decision. So can he say how much cancelling the contract will cost the taxpayer, and specifically the costs incurred in his own department? He simply can't keep blaming others for his own mistakes. This disastrous decision sits squarely with him and his office. Isn't it the case that this Transport Secretary's approach to transport and wider Brexit contingency planning is off the Richter scale of incompetence? And for the good of the nation, and for the sake of some semblance of faith being restored to this shambolic government, shouldn't he now, at long last, do the decent thing and go?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I have to say that the honourable gentleman opposite brings a new meaning to the words utter hogwash. First thing to say, Mr. Speaker, he clearly wasn't listening when I said we have spent no money on this contract. My department is doing a lot of work on no-deal Brexit preparations, as are other parts of Whitehall. That is the prudent thing to do, but we have not spent any money on this contract. The contract was, in fact, assured jointly by my officials and officials in the Treasury. And he says, Mr. Speaker, that the letter's worth nothing. Well, let me just quote from this, Mr. Speaker, from the Managing Director of Arklow Shipping, one of Europe's biggest shipping companies with operations in Rotterdam and Ireland, which covers chartering, technical crewing, finance. And what he said is this: Arklow Shipping has been working with Seabourn for 12 months in connection with Seabourn's proposals to develop new freight services between the UK and continental Europe. Arklow Shipping is therefore familiar with Seabourn's agreement with Her Majesty's Government to provide additional freight capacity in the event of the UK's departure from the European Union on a no-deal basis. In support of the current proposals to develop the shipping route between Ramsgate and Ostend, Arklow Shipping intends to provide equity finance for the purchase of both vessels and an equity stake with Seabourn, which will be the operating entity of the project. Seabourn is a firm that brings together experienced and capable shipping professionals. I consider that Seabourn's plans to deliver a new service to facilitate trade following the UK's departure from the European Union are both viable and deliverable. I will be working closely with the team at Seabourn to ensure they have appropriate support from Arklow Shipping to deliver on their commitments to Her Majesty's Government. Mr. Speaker, enough said.